Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're going to be diving into the Quran, a text considered by Muslims to be the literal word of God, a book revered for its poetic language, its deep spiritual insights, and its profound impact on human history.
Yeah, it's amazing how a book revealed in 7th century Arabia, still shapes the lives of billions across the globe today. It really speaks to its universality, its timeless wisdom, that transcends cultural and historical boundaries.
Absolutely. And we have a lot to unpack. So why don't we start with the basics? The Quran is divided into chapters called surahs and further subdivided into verses. What are some of the main themes we'll encounter, as we go through this deep dive?
I think the overarching theme you're going to see is God's absolute oneness, which is known as Tawhid.
Yeah.
This concept kind of permeates every aspect of the Quran and shapes Islamic belief and practice. But we'll also explore the concept of prophethood. The Quran presents a long line of prophets, from Adam to Noah to Abraham, Moses, and even Jesus, all sent by God to guide humanity.
So it's recognizing these figures from other Abrahamic traditions, but within a uniquely Islamic framework.
Exactly. The Quran doesn't claim to replace previous scriptures, but to correct and clarify them. It offers a different perspective on those shared stories. And then there's the Day of Judgment. That's a really central concept in Islam. The Quran is filled with vivid descriptions of this final reckoning, where humanity will be held accountable for their actions.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. Are there any specific passages or verses that are particularly well known or evocative?
Yeah, one that comes to mind is the opening of the Quran. It's known as Surah al-Fatiha. It's actually a really short but powerful prayer that's recited by Muslims multiple times a day. It encapsulates the essence of Islamic belief. It praises God's mercy and guidance.
So it kind of sets the stage for the entire book, establishing a direct connection between God and humanity.
Precisely. And then there are the verses about God's attributes. The Quran repeatedly describes God as the compassionate, the merciful, but it also emphasizes his justice. You see frequent warnings about straying from God's path and the consequences that await on the Day of Judgment.
So it's a balance of mercy and justice, reminding us that our choices have consequences.
Absolutely. And woven throughout all of this are these beautiful, poetic verses that capture your imagination. For instance, the description of paradise in the Quran is incredibly detailed and evocative, promising rivers of milk and honey, gardens of eternal bliss, and the ultimate reward for those who lead a righteous life.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the very first revelation. The Quran opens with a powerful command. Recite. God is instructing Muhammad, setting the stage for the entire revelation.
It is such a striking beginning, and right from the outset, the emphasis is on God's creative power. The opening verses describe God as the one who created the heavens and the earth, who brought forth life from nothingness, and who fashioned humankind from a humble clot of blood.
It establishes this sense of awe and wonder, reminding us of our place in this grand scheme of creation.
Precisely. And this theme of creation continues throughout the entire Quran. It prompts us to reflect on God's power, wisdom, and this intricate design of the universe.
Now, I'm curious about how the Quran addresses the prophets. We mentioned that it recognizes figures like Noah, Abraham, Moses, and even Jesus. How are their stories presented within the Islamic narrative?
They're presented as part of a continuous chain of prophets, all sent by the same God, to guide humanity towards truth and righteousness. The Quran doesn't shy away from recounting their struggles, their triumphs, and the lessons to be learned from their lives.
So it's not just about revering them as figures from the past, but about drawing insights from their experiences.
Exactly. Their stories are meant to inspire, to guide, and to remind us that even the most righteous individuals face challenges and temptations. Take the story of Noah, for example. The Quran dedicates an entire chapter to his struggle to build the ark and to warn his people about the impending flood.
Yeah, I remember reading about Noah in the Bible as well. Does the Quranic version differ significantly?
There are similarities, for sure. Both narratives emphasize God's punishment of the wicked and his protection of the faithful. But I think the Quranic account focuses more on the emotional and spiritual toll of Noah's mission. You see his despair as his people mock and reject him, his unwavering faith in God's promise, and ultimately his relief as he and his followers are saved from the deluge.
It sounds like a story about the resilience of faith,
Yeah,
even in the face of overwhelming adversity.
exactly. And it underscores the importance of obedience to God, even when his commands seem difficult or illogical.
Okay, so the Quran establishes God's oneness, emphasizes his role as creator, and presents a series of prophets as examples of faith, and obedience. What else can you tell us about the structure and flow of the book?
Well, it's not a chronological narrative like the Bible. The chapters are arranged roughly from longest to shortest, and they often jump between different themes and
So
stories.
it's more thematic than chronological.
Exactly. You might find a passage about God's attributes, followed by a story about a past prophet, then a set of guidelines for social conduct, and then a reflection on the Day of Judgment.
Wow, it sounds like a rich tapestry, woven together with different threads of wisdom, guidance, and narratives.
It certainly is. And this weaving together of different elements, I think, creates a really unique reading experience. You're constantly challenged to connect the dots, to see the bigger picture, and to understand how different aspects of faith and life intertwine.
So we've talked about God, creation, prophets, but what about guidance for daily life? Does the Quran offer any practical advice for how to live a righteous life?
Oh, absolutely. The Quran provides extensive guidance on matters of morality, ethics, and social conduct. It covers everything from prayer and charity to marriage and divorce to business dealings and interactions with people of other faiths. It's essentially a blueprint for living a life that is pleasing a God and beneficial to society.
It's fascinating how it addresses both personal and societal dimensions of life. Could you give us some specific examples?
Sure, like the concept of zakat. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And essentially it means obligatory charity. The Quran mandates that Muslims who possess a certain level of wealth give a fixed portion to those in need. It's a way of ensuring social justice and redistributing wealth to create more equitable society.
So it's not just about personal piety, but about contributing to the well-being of the community.
Exactly. And then there are the verses about honesty, trustworthiness, and fulfilling promises. These qualities are very highly valued in Islam and seen as essential for building strong relationships and fostering trust within the community. The Quran even goes into detail about conducting business in a fair and ethical manner, prohibiting things like usury and deceit.
It sounds like the Quran is very concerned with establishing a just and moral society. Does it address issues like war and violence?
It does. The concept of jihad, it's often misunderstood in the West, but it's a multifaceted concept in Islam. The greater jihad is the internal struggle against one's own base desires, while the lesser jihad refers to armed struggle in self-defense, or to protect the oppressed. Even within the context of war, the Quran lays down strict guidelines. It prohibits targeting civilians, destroying crops, or using excessive force.
So it's not a carte blanche for violence, but a carefully regulated system with a clear emphasis on ethical conduct even in times of conflict.
Precisely. And it's worth noting that the Quran emphasizes the importance of peace and reconciliation whenever possible. War is always presented as a last resort, and forgiveness and mercy are highly encouraged.
That forgiveness piece is really interesting. Does the Quran talk a lot about God's mercy?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most frequently invoked names for God in the Quran is Ar-Rahman, which means the most compassionate, and Ar-Rahim, which means the most merciful. These attributes are woven throughout the entire text, reminding us that God's mercy is boundless, and that he is always willing to forgive those who sincerely repent.
It sounds like a very hopeful message. Does the Quran also address those who might question or doubt God's existence?
It does. There are passages that directly address the skeptics and the doubters, urging them to reflect on the wonders of creation, the signs of God's presence in the world around them, and the inherent wisdom of his laws. The Quran even challenges those who doubt its divine origin to produce something comparable in beauty and eloquence.
That's a bold challenge. It speaks to the confidence the Quran has in its own message and its ability to resonate with those who seek truth.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that the Quran often encourages critical thinking and reflection. It doesn't shy away from addressing difficult questions or acknowledging different perspectives.
So it's not about blind faith, but about engaging with the text thoughtfully and coming to your own understanding.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the things that makes the Quran so compelling. It's a text that speaks to the intellect as much as it speaks to the heart.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but there's one thing I'm still curious about. You mentioned earlier that the Quran is considered a literary masterpiece. Could you expand on that? What makes its language and style so unique?
The Quran is renowned for its rhythmic prose, its use of metaphors and similes, and its vivid imagery. Muslims believe that its eloquence is unmatched, and that it's impossible to replicate its beauty and power in any other language.
It's fascinating how language plays such a crucial role in its impact. Do you have any favorite passages that exemplify this beauty?
Oh, there are so many to choose from, but one that always strikes me is the verse that describes God's throne, extending over the heavens and the earth. The imagery is so powerful, conveying a sense of God's majesty and omnipresence.
Wow, that's beautiful. It sounds like the language itself is meant to evoke a sense of awe and wonder.
It is. And, the Quran's emphasis on language and eloquence goes beyond just aesthetics. The way the words are arranged, the rhythm and cadence of the verses, even the sounds of the Arabic letters themselves are all believed to have a spiritual impact.
So it's not just about understanding the meaning, but about experiencing the words on a deeper level.
Exactly. Muslims believe that the Quran is a form of divine music, a revelation that touches the soul as much as it engages the mind.
Now, I've heard that the Quran is traditionally recited in a specific melodic style. Is that correct?
Yes, it's called tajweed, and it's a highly developed art form. It focuses on preserving the correct pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation of the Arabic text.
So it's not just about reading the words, but about embodying them in a way
Yeah,
that enhances their spiritual impact.
precisely. Tajweed elevates the recitation of the Quran to an act of worship, allowing the beauty and power of the language to resonate on a much deeper level.
We've talked about the Quran's guidance on morality, social justice, war and peace, forgiveness, and even its unique literary style. What would you say is the ultimate message, the core principle that ties everything together?
I would say the ultimate message is submission to God's will. The very word Islam means submission or surrender. It's about recognizing God's absolute sovereignty and aligning our lives with his guidance as revealed in the Quran.
So it's about recognizing our place in the grand scheme of things, accepting God's wisdom and authority,
Yeah.
and striving to live in accordance with his will.
Exactly. And the submission, the surrender, it's not seen as a burden or a restriction, but as a path to liberation and true fulfillment.
It's about freeing ourselves from the tyranny of our own desires and finding peace and purpose in aligning ourselves with the divine will.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we are not the masters of our own destiny, but rather servants of a higher power who loves us, guides us, and wants what's best for us.
Okay, so we've explored the Quran's emphasis on God's oneness, the role of prophets, its ethical and social teachings, its unique literary beauty, and the ultimate message of submission to God's will. I think it's safe to say we've only scratched the surface of this incredibly rich and complex text. Yeah, it feels like we've been on this incredible journey. Through centuries of history and spiritual wisdom, what I find truly remarkable is that this one book has had such a profound impact on shaping laws, cultures, and even entire civilizations.
It's amazing how, despite its ancient origins, the Quran continues to speak to people. Across cultures and time periods, it offers this timeless wisdom that really resonates with the human condition, regardless of your background or belief system.
It makes you think about the power of words and the enduring legacy of faith. Now, for someone listening who's intrigued and wants to explore the Quran further, where would you recommend they begin?
Oh, there are so many wonderful resources available if you're new to the Quran. I would suggest starting with a good translation in your native language. There are many reputable translations out there that strive to capture both the meaning and the beauty of the original Arabic.
Yeah. I imagine tackling the original Arabic might be quite challenging for a beginner.
It can be. But if you're interested in delving deeper into the nuances of the language, there are courses and online resources that can help you learn.
And what about commentaries or interpretations? I imagine there's a wealth of scholarship out there to help guide readers through the text.
Absolutely. There are centuries of scholarship and commentary on the Quran from various schools of thought within Islam. And exploring these different perspectives can really enrich your understanding and provide valuable insights into the text's multifaceted nature.
So it's not just about reading the words on the page, but about engaging with a vibrant intellectual tradition that spans centuries.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the value of personal reflection and contemplation. Take your time with the text, ponder its verses, and allow its message to resonate within your own heart and mind.
That sounds like great advice. Are there any institutions or organizations that might be helpful for someone seeking guidance or community?
Local mosques and Islamic centers can be wonderful resources. They often offer classes, study groups, and opportunities to connect with other people who are interested in learning about Islam and the Quran.
So it's a chance to not just study the text in isolation, but to engage with a living community of believers.
Exactly. The Quran's not just a book to be read, it's a guide for life, a source of inspiration, and a foundation for a vibrant and dynamic faith.
It's been so enlightening exploring the Quran with you today. I think the key takeaway for me is that the Quran invites us to engage with it on multiple levels, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of the Quran lies in its ability to speak to each individual in a unique and personal way.
It's a text that challenges us to think deeply, to live ethically, and to connect with something greater than ourselves. And as we've seen, it's a text that continues to inspire and shape the world in really profound ways.
To our listeners, I encourage you to continue exploring, to keep seeking, and to allow the wisdom of the Quran to enrich your lives.
Beautifully said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Quran. I hope you found it insightful, and I encourage you to continue your own exploration of this truly remarkable text. Until next time, keep those pages turning.